Now let's turn our attention to the arts. Now, if you look throughout history, arts have always been reflective of the mindset of society or what society is going through. So in other words, if you have any type of revolution within a country and there's great change going on, it's always going to be reflected through music, through paintings, through the artist movement. They're always going to reflect that struggle for liberation, for freedom, and the great change that has taken place in society. Now, I think if you look at the arts today, you can see what I mean by the dumbing down of society, how education has been utilized actually as a weapon against people to prevent them from thinking. Now, if you look at today, some of the most popular artists are contemporary artists are Damien Hirst, Jeff Koons, Onkawara. Now, if you don't know who these artists are, these are the artists whose works are being sold at the largest art auction houses in the world, like Sotheby's and Christie's, for hundreds of thousands of dollars and sometimes even millions of dollars. So just to give you an example, so you know, here's an example of Damien Hirst spot painting, for which he is famous. Here's an example of Onkawara's date painting. And to show you an example of Jeff Koons, here's an example of one of his pieces of art, which is a porcelain Pink Panther with a blonde woman. And this piece sold for $1.8 million in 1998, I believe it was. So, just to show you the ridiculous nature of how we don't think for ourselves anymore, these artists are famous for these pieces of art that I don't even consider art, just because they've been branded by some of the largest art dealers in the world, like White Cube in London and Larry Gagosian out of New York, or because students who go to art school have been told by their professors that this is great art. Now, if you think about it, if a young adult can think for himself, if you showed an artist that had just, or a student that had just studied, say the masters like Rembrandt, Picasso, Renoir, Monet, Manet, Miro, Goya, and showed him the pieces of art that I just showed you, like a Damien Hirst spot painting, an Onkawara date painting, and Jeff Koons porcelain sculpture, and asked them if this is great art. If they had not been told by someone who has been put in a position of authority to tell us this is great art, do you really believe that they would think this is great art? Now, I know I'm going to offend some art critics out there, but this is not art to me. Picasso's Guernica was art. Goya's Third of May was art. Any Sebastião Salgado photograph is art, because these are pieces of art that make you think. Now, you see a drastic change in the art produced today, and then, artists back in the day and the art they produced, because these were pieces like a Sebastião Salgado artwork. I remember I went to see an exhibition in Seoul not too long ago. And I could literally stand in front of one of his photographs for 10 minutes. They're so captivating. It's so thought-provoking. Now, you tell me that the Pink Panther is really, a porcelain Pink Panther with a topless woman is really going to make you stare and provoke any type of intelligent conversation within 10 minutes. So I think these are just the nameness of the type of contemporary art that's being produced today. It's just reflective of the dumbing down society. Now, if you want to understand, too, how fraudulent the art world is, then I recommend that you read this book. It's called The $12 Million Stuffed Shark. And the title of this book is exactly what it sounds like. There was a Connecticut hedge fund manager that actually paid $12 million for a stuffed shark, because that was considered art. The interesting thing about the book, too, is you'll see that bankers, in particular the Rockefellers, have a huge hand in the fraudulent nature of the art world today. Now that I've finished talking about the dumbing down of the art world, I'm going to talk about the dumbing down of the music industry. Now, the concept of the dumbing down of certain elements of society, I think, is really important to understand, because I think it's deliberate, and its purpose is basically to keep people moving along in society like a hamster on a hamster wheel, without practicing any kind of critical thinking and realizing what the truths of society are. When we look at the music industry, obviously there are many different genres of music, but I think it's critical to look at the genres of music that have the greatest reach to young adults today, and that, of course, would be R&B and hip-hop. Hip-hop music started in the 70s in the South Bronx in New York. There's a marked difference in hip-hop music back then and hip-hop music today. Hip-hop music back then had its roots in social consciousness, was a form of lyricism to express the reality of what was going on in inner cities, the struggle, the resistance. It was about truth and spirituality. Today, if you look at hip-hop and R&B, both those mediums, they basically only address three subject matters, and that's romance and sex, violence, and materialism. Even if you look at the names, back then some of my favorite artists were like De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, Public Enemy, Digable Planet, The Roots, and today you have artists with names like Eminem, like Candy, 50 Cent, Money. So you can see it's all about materialism today. Today, you have artists like Jay-Z and Soulja Boy flaunting materialism in their music videos that artists from back in the day would actually mock in their videos. That's how much hip-hop has lost its way. I do believe that the deliberate dumbing down in music today, and I say it's deliberate because, when you still have very talented, intelligent MCs out there like Mos Def, they very rarely fit into the radio format of most commercial radio stations, so they won't receive a lot of airplay. So I think that the blatant commercialism of all hip-hop music today helps to dumb down the young generation and helps to promote, unfortunately, a sheep-herd mentality within all of them. Now I'm going to address government. Now, this may seem like a very simple question, but if you ask most Americans what type of government we have, most will say a democracy. And that's completely understandable because, we've heard so many times of the fact that the U.S. is a democracy. But that's just not the case. The U.S. was actually formed as a republic. A republic is a vastly different form of government than a democracy. So you see, in a democracy, if you have 1 million people that live in a democracy, and you have 500,001 persons that basically desire a certain situation, and you have 499,999 people that vote against, say, a resolution. In a democracy, that resolution will pass. Now, in a republic, everyone that lives, all 1 million citizens, would have an equal say in coming to an understanding of what resolutions should be passed. So because a democracy can leave 499,999 people out of 1 million totally unsatisfied with the results, then a lot of injustices can be perpetrated under a democracy. So that is why the Greek philosopher Plato said that democracy always ultimately leads to tyranny. So it's actually a ludicrous concept when we hear our presidents and prime ministers saying, we want to spread democracy to the rest of the world. So in the end, in effect, they're saying we want to spread tyranny to the world. What they should instead be saying is that we want to spread justice to the world, not democracy, because justice is far different than democracy. Even though a democracy is really not the desirable form of government, and a republic is, the irony of the situation is that in countries in which the leaders claim there is democracy, there still is no democracy. A prime example of this is the $850 billion bailout plan from the pockets of hard-working, tax-paying citizens in America to the bankers on Wall Street. Now, when that bill came up for vote, the constituents were voting 99-1 against approval of the bill. So only 1% of constituents wanted the bailout plan to pass. So in a democracy, it's clear-cut. 99% against 1%, the bill doesn't pass. But what happened? The bill, of course, passed because the powers that be and the bankers wanted the bill to pass. So this is basically a plutocracy where a very elite group of powers that be can overrule even the majority time and time again. So the majority basically is voiceless in such a government. And that's the whole irony. If you ask, I would say if you ask 1 million Americans if spreading democracy to the rest of the world is a good idea, that probably well over 99% would answer yes, because they don't understand what Plato said, that spreading justice and spreading a republic form of government instead of democracy is a far better idea.